Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. So lovely to have you here with us again this week. We've got a very interesting show coming up.
Indeed.
And unlike me jabbering my head off for most of the time, we're going to have Barry.
Oh, I get to jabber for a bit. That's nice.
We're going to be talking about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And I know this is, as I said, this is a very dear to his heart topic for Barry and me too. But I know that he has a lot to say about this. So we're going to just start with you this week, Barry. So you want to use the subject? Sure, we'll have some lively conversation around it at some point.
Yes, indeed. So let me preface this by explaining why I'm so passionate about this. Because I grew up in a paradigm, which I think most men did, is there were only two choices about how to be, which is to be like the stoic, somewhat emotionally stunted, macho type person, which is what my father was. That was the model I was raised with. Or to be more of a softer, nice guy. So it's kind of bad boy, nice guy with the two parameters that seem to be what men played with. And neither one was ideal. But it was kind of, but it spoke to my way of being, which one I'd lean towards more often than not. What I didn't understand until 2007, when this whole thing unfolded for me, was a third choice, which is masculinity. Because I don't know if anybody, other men out there have known this, but I wasn't raised with that understanding in my family. There wasn't something I was taught at school. There was no education about what masculinity really was. It was just be a male, be a man. And there was all that man up stuff and, big boys don't cry, don't be a sissy, all that sort of languaging that basically made most boys into cold-hearted men to a degree. And frankly, the understanding what masculinity is for me was changed my life completely, because it really had me see through a different lens about life, about how to be a man in a healthy way, but also to have compassion for those who didn't have it, because I didn't have it up until that point. So that's the preface of what happened. And why I studied this work is because of a bad breakup I had right before that. 2006 was the end of a cycle I've been running in 3 original relationships where the women wanted me to man up. And it wasn't that they didn't say, you need to be the masculine man and all this, because they didn't understand either, but I wasn't being what they wanted. And the third one told me that, because the other two didn't. But the third one was kind enough and blatant enough to say, what I wanted was this, and you're not that. And so I was going, okay, I'm missing something. So that led me into this work. And I've studied with various different teachers, and I'm not going to talk about all that stuff. But basically what I got to understand and embody was being masculine was something that is easy to do for men when we know how. And the way I describe the difference between machoism and masculinity is machoism is really ego-driven, more big cojones, balls and ego, like my way, the highway, I'm in charge. Kind of the archetype I use is the Archie Bunker from All in the Family. Is kind of the model is what machoism in its most dysfunctional way was expressed. Masculinity, which is what I've learned to embody and own more fully, does have the open heart like a nice guy, but has a strong, clear direction and purpose based on his spine being straight. Like he stands up tall, owning who he is, not out of ego, but out of a place of ownership, of being true to himself. And in that place, the divinity of masculinity really is connecting to spirit. One of my teachers, David Data, talks about how to be a truly masculine man, a man's purpose comes before his relationship, meaning that his partnership is not going to be satisfying the need for purpose. He can do that on his own. And I think we can talk about that next week. But this episode, though, the masculinity was about really honoring that. And what I've come to learn and really own for myself is that for me, really, a man's relationship to spirit comes first, if you have that belief system, then his purpose, then his relationship. Because what happens is his relationship doesn't have to carry the weight of all those other things. So it's not like it comes in third place, but his relationship becomes easier to be fully into because he's taking care of the other two separately. Now, and by the way, let me preface by saying masculinity and femininity are not gender specific.
I was about to say I think we need to lay the foundation there of really what the divine feminine and the divine masculine is before we go into our how we show up in this world, how we sexually
Absolutely.
identify ourselves. So
So that was my sort of condensed story of what I've been through. But yes, we as human beings, independent of gender, sexual polarity, sexual preference, any of those things, is basically is embodying, carrying a position on a spectrum between masculine and feminine. It's like a long spectrum between hot and cold or black and white. It's a range.
yeah,
And the thing about this is we're not locked into one place, because what happens is during our activities in the world, we may be more in our masculine, more in our feminine, again, independent of our gender, independent of our polarity. And so understanding that we will carry that, and in relationship and between men and women, I'll talk more about the feminine in a moment, it is the dance of those two that creates the polarity and the chemistry and the sexuality that makes relationships work.
yeah.
Again, not gender required. So it can be for straight couples or gay couples too.
Exactly. And I think let's spend a little time on that, the divine feminine, the divine masculine that
Yeah,
does exist, as you say, within all of us. We all have divine feminine, divine masculine in us. And those energies, the divine feminine is more of the sort of receptive, the more the sort of going inward, the more sort of nurturing, um, quieter space of inspiration and coming up with ideas and things. And the divine masculine is a little more of the action, the implementation, the outward, and we need both. We need to be in our feminine and our masculine. But what I find really interesting, what I love about your work, Barry, is it's how we then take what, because I think to be truly in balance within each of us individually, we need to do that dance within ourselves. But then in the outer world, in our relationships, how do we do that dance? So
right.
that's the part when, as I think you're saying, is when as a heterosexual male, there was too much in his feminine. Maybe it wasn't showing up like the way the woman you were with wanted.
Actually, no, because it wasn't even feminine. It was just just passive. It was almost neutral in a sense, some ways. It
Wow.
was interesting because, and in terms of just putting into basic principles of sexual polarity, she'd end up being more in the masculine than I was, and I was more in my feminine in that moment. But in terms of how I was being in the relationship, it's more passive, and
Mm,
it was not out of being feminine. It was actually being, to be blunt, lazy in a way. So, because feminine is not lazy, just to be clear.
yeah,
The
exactly.
thing about the thing about feminine and masculine is they are the yin and yang, so to speak. So the big broad strokes of how the feminine energy is. Feminine energy is the life force. Masculine energy is the death energy, like emptiness, the void, stillness, depth. That's what masculinity brings to the world, so to speak. It also has action as well, but it's interesting how we have this sort of opposite sort of pieces in both sides. The
Mm,
feminine energy is more collaborative and inclusive. The feminine brings together, it's an energy that brings together and peoples and ideas. The masculine is more singular focused. So the masculine is more about target acquisition, scouting, seeking the target, going for the goal, whatever that is. And so the feminine and masculine work in different ways. And like you're saying, like I've said too, having both resources available makes life so much more functional,
mhm,
because we all have that place where we want to be inclusive and collaborative. And also the times we want to go for something and have an achievement. So it's about having both in balance with each other that really works. And for the feminine, the 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 way I describe this, and I've used it in these analogies because I learned from my teachers, is the feminine energy is like nature. It is that powerful. The feminine energy, especially in women who own this energy, the way that it was described one of the seminars I took is like imagining, trying to get the word out properly, a river running down the hillside. It's a river that gets massive after the rains have come, and it's like pouring down the mountainside. The river is the feminine. The banks of the river are the masculine,
exactly.
structural, solid,
Yeah.
secure. But recognize this:
Healthy
the
balance.
river, exactly. Well, yes, and notice this: when the feminine is in full power, it can break the banks. It can
Mm,
burst the banks, meaning that the feminine power is more powerful than most men understand or think. And so to be a feminine woman is not weak. Far from it. It's empowered. It's the level of such grace and authority that a lot of women have yet to really claim that for themselves. Some women do, and frankly, I admire them when I meet them, when I see them. So knowing that being feminine is a good thing, and it's an energy that is grace filled, it is life saving in some ways. So it's a powerful place to be for women as well, and for men who carry that energy as well.
and not just life-saving, but life-giving. I mean, we all came through. We're a woman, so we have to, yeah, definitely. That being feminine is most certainly, it is not a weakness or the lesser sex or the weaker sex, as they say sometimes.
Indeed.
Nothing.
That's definitely a misnomer, and because of a society that doesn't want to have equality between men and women, that's a whole different conversation.
But for today, we've established the sort of the energies of both, and that we all
Yep.
inhabit. That is within all of us. We have access to both of these energies. But let's put it into the realm of like dating and being in relationship, because just like you had a father that modeled a certain way of being in the world as a man, I had a I didn't grow up with a father, so I grew up with a very strong mother that
Mhm.
did everything. I mean, she created an empire. She was, we used to joke, we called her Mother, Father, God. She was everything.
Yep.
She was. I mean, she was, so I had that model as a woman. So I never got to see the interplay between man and woman, as in the roles of, husband, wife. I never got to see that. Not that I feel like I needed to see it necessarily, but I'm curious just what you see in your, you're talking about some of the women you were with were more in touch with their masculine side, and you said it wasn't even that you weren't attached to your feminine side, it was more that you were just showing up a little bit lazy in the relationship, a little
Yeah.
passive. So
And the truth is that, and again, as I said earlier, masculine and feminine is not gender specific.
mhm,
However, in dating and in relating, having one partner be more masculine, one partner be more feminine is ideal because that creates the chemistry and the connection and the attraction. Having said that, and again, use generalities, most men tend towards the masculine, most women tend towards the feminine, and there are exceptions. There are straight couples where the woman is more masculine and the man is more feminine, and it works for them because that's the way they met, they connected. So I'm just saying don't decry or say one's better than the other or different than the other, but the
mhm,
general population, men have more ease to move into the more alignment to the masculine, women have more ease moving into the alignment to the feminine. And I talk about this in my book about how chemistry is renewable. Some people think that when you have chemistry initially, it's great, the honeymoon is wonderful, then it fades away. What that is, I believe, is a forgetfulness to renew our batteries in the polarity that we normally reside in.
mhm.
If a man and woman come together and one's more masculine, one's more feminine, that creates again connection, chemistry, attraction. If we get lazy with that, we just hang out. It's almost like batteries in a drawer; they lose their magnetism. So what you can do is recharge them. So for men recharging their masculine batteries, women recharge their feminine batteries is what rebuilds the chemistry in couples.
But
So it's you do. Sorry.
don't you think though that because I'm thinking about not just my relationship, but I'm I'm at the moment I'm watching that Netflix Beckham, and I'm really seeing that as between Victoria and David Beckham, this sort of there's quite a feminine quality to him, even though he's this tough soccer football player, and
Yeah.
she is a very strong woman. But I see him also as the masculine. So what I'm saying is, and I also witnessed this in my own relationship, is that we float between. There are times when I see myself much more masculine in my relationship with Hootie, and he's more feminine, and then there's days or times of the day or needs whatever they are where we completely switch roles, and he's very masculine and I'm much more of the feminine energy I'm talking about now.
And this is the key of really having the grace in a relationship where you both move in the opposite position. It's not like dance partners on a dance floor. You don't try and do the same thing, you do the opposite, and it fits together really well.
Yeah,
There are times when both partners do need to be in the masculine or both need to be in the feminine. It happens in different situations, circumstances, but you don't stay there. So what you're doing with Yudi is to have that graceful switch where you step into the masculine role, and it's not something you think about; you just do it,
exactly.
and that's a healthy relationship. When it comes to the bedroom for relationships, I'm not getting personal here, is that the polarity is what works most powerfully in the sexual connection and chemistry. And as I said before, the partnership not necessarily matches one to one with each polarity; it can switch. In fact, when you're in a relationship, if the man is almost always the masculine partner and the woman's always the feminine partner, it can be fun sometimes to switch it up and change roles for the fun of it. So it's not like it's always hard and fast one way only, but it is the recognition of the grace and the dance of having the opposites working together. The model I like using is Argentine tango as a partner dance, because the way the couple fits together is one is masculine, one is feminine, and it's just the grace and the beauty that shines from that is how couples can be in their relationship as well.
Mm. Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, some, because I work with some pretty powerful, high achieving women that
Excuse me.
are, bless you, that are definitely in their masculine when it comes to in their work and how they show up at work.
Oh yes,
Um, and what I see interestingly and it's what's occurring to me is I think it really is it's when you're both vying for the same role that the issues come about. It's like when because like one client in particular I'm thinking of who is, highly accomplished and everything, and the man she's with is wants to be the man, but in a very macho, old-fashioned way, and he hasn't earned it. And
right.
and it's I can see this friction there, but it's hard for her to step more into her feminine because he's, to put it bluntly, all talk and on no action. He just
Right.
believes that because he's male, that she
He
should,
should.
that he
Yes,
should, be in this role, and she should be more, in his mind, feminine, subservient, and not a ball breaker, to use his language. But at the same time, he is being, I believe, lazy in the relationship. He's not backing up his words in his actions.
that's the
And
flaw.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
conflict. So
Yes.
let's talk about that when you're both vying for that same position.
This, this is one of the challenges that women face a lot because the world has changed so much, and women have become much more into leadership roles, be successful, be entrepreneurs, be business women, and men haven't learned to work with that very well. And frankly, the challenge for women is to learn how to, because they've been so committed to growing and being a bit successful, they've almost donned the masculine way of being. So when they meet men, they're not sure how to disengage that and trust him. The biggest issue, I think, between a lot of couples is the trust issue, because when a man provides that depth, as I meant earlier, that space, that consciousness that is the masculine presence that she can feel, she can trust that. But most men, again, because they haven't embodied the masculine that well, tend to come from their ego and from their mindset, which is what gets in the way. They
Mhm.
don't know. They don't. First of all, they don't trust themselves. So how is the woman going to trust them as well? And so in this case, it sounds like this guy is afraid for losing his belief in himself to be the leader because she's doing so well.
Mhm.
And rather than simply cheer her on and stay masculine to himself, because not threatening him if he owns that place, then she would allow. Then she'll recognize she can trust him, but he's not doing that,
Yeah.
and that's the gap that's unfortunately going to not make it work.
It's a fascinating conversation because as you're talking, I'm thinking it really is, because just like you, I'm a solopreneur, entrepreneur, and I think about Hoodie's energy, and it's when he is actually sort of what I consider more feminine energy, in the sense of quieter, more solid, more introspective, that sort of more nurturing energy that I experience him is actually more masculine because he's safer for me. He's not trying to, because going back to this other relationship, there's a lot of putting down coming from the man to elevate himself. He keeps putting this woman down so that
Yes,
he can feel strong about himself, and
it's
then that
combative. Yes,
and so it's a really bad combination. They're both vying for this, because she's fighting to save her position and he's fighting to save his and put it down. But
this is the thing.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that with Hootie, when he is quiet and gentle and loving, I become more feminine because I trust him more. I
Right.
see that as a strength and a solid place, no ego that I have to battle with.
That's the key word, ego.
Mhm.
Because the thing is that the combative energy this guy's bringing forward is because he's defending his ego. He's scared of losing. A man owns his masculinity, and I think Udi's got this down by the sounds of it, is he doesn't have to fight for it.
Yeah.
He just owns it and presence. And by the way, that stillness and silence is a masculine quality, although it can also be an introvert quality as well, just to overlay another piece.
Hmm.
So masculinity doesn't necessarily speak loudly. It's a lot about presencing and being in consciousness. One of the depths is to have that space of ownership. It doesn't require proof, doesn't require billboards, doesn't require advertising. He just is. And so in Udi's case, it sounds like he gets it, he knows it, he owns it, he lives it, which makes it easy for you. So
Mm-hmm.
you can be feminine more easily because the trust is built, because you can see that what he's being isn't going anywhere else. It's solid, it's reliable, it's trustable, which is what women want from most men, frankly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's such a interesting. I mean, we there was all this. Gosh, I can't remember who it was. Well, I do actually. I'm not going to name names. Well, maybe slightly I might, but I'm thinking of a much older woman. She's probably in her, gosh, certainly in her
Oh,
late 80s now,
already.
who used to give classes in LA about sort of, women being more in their feminine, and how to treat a man, and how to, and it was just, quite honestly, I found it nauseating. It was because she was using things like, you know, the divine feminine and masculine, but it was really just a very old fashioned sort of roles that she thought men and women should play.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, as you said, the world has evolved, and it's not just women that are struggling because they're now expected to be everything, out in the workforce. We're going to be talking about this next week, about sort of finding your purpose and what's your life's mission and things like that. It used to be that that was more on the shoulders of the men to have to work on that, and the women could stay, years and years ago, more as the homemaker and things like that. But things have changed so much. I mean, I have friends that where they've decided to have children, and the wife just happened to be making more money, so it made more sense for her to continue working and her husband to become the stay-at-home parent with their child, and it worked perfectly for them because, again, they were so confident in their masculine and feminine energies. There was no shame in it. But
Right.
again, so men have had to adapt as well. They've had to sort of switch out of that sort of role of, I just go to work and everything at home is taken care of, and I come home and I put my feet up and I'm served dinner and I don't have to do anything. They're
Yes.
to take on other roles as well.
Well, this is the thing that I don't say men have had to. Men are still learning how to. That's one of the challenges. And the way I've described it before is because the way that the evolution of culture and the way women have especially evolved in the last 70, 80 years has been transformational. Once back in the 50s, women didn't have their own jobs so early. They didn't even have bank accounts or credit cards. They
Mm-hmm.
were basically staying with their parents until their suitor pursued them, dated them, and then courted them to take them, to marry them, move into his house. So men ran the show that way. But after the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s, for those who remember that far back, it was really the time. It was kind of where women stepped out. I mean, and it's funny because the role model back in the 60s in England was Twiggy.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who didn't know her, she had short cut hair, she had flat chest, she had low makeup, she had broad shouldered like business suits on. It was very very fashionable, but she basically was looking like a man in a way. And the challenge was women went to work for the first time, basically, really in the 70s and into the 80s, where they were standing shoulder to shoulder with the men. But unfortunately, they were in a business model that was built for men, so they had to copy that to a degree.
Yeah,
So women weren't yet owning their feminine gifts in the world, which is happening now, thankfully. So a lot of women, basically, I remember going to happy hour after work in the 80s. Many women, it's like there was just this like combative energy from both women and men because there was the competitive spirit happening all the time. So there
mm-hmm.
was no masculine and feminine dance going on. It was all just who's better at this than the other one, independent of gender. So thankfully, we're in the third level now, so to speak, where women have, especially more now that I know entrepreneurs, women are doing their work from a much more feminine place, and it's working.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is men haven't caught up yet.
Yeah.
A lot of men don't work with that.
Yeah, no, and I'm thinking, again, in the workforce, I mean, it's, yeah, and I'm not talking about the women that adopted a very male persona and angry, aggressive persona, or competitive or fighting or anything like that, but just still the inequity when it comes to sort of a strong woman is a bitch, whereas a strong man, you don't call him a bastard.
Oh,
He's a strong man. He's at work. He's whatever. But we
the
still,
disparity.
exactly, there are still these terms used to put women down that are strong and capable and in their masculine energy, which we're saying is good. nobody should just be strictly in their feminine. No woman should be strictly in her feminine energy, and no man should be strictly in his masculine energy. The mix of both is what creates that really well balanced personality within us. Is when we do that dance within, not just dance without. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, the world unfortunately does have to catch up, and also equal pay. You know,
That, I would say the Western world especially has got, unfortunately, so embedded in the patriarchal structure that hasn't evolved out of yet. So in a way, we're on the leading edge or bleeding edge of this growth and evolution for this, for the conversation, because it's time that we change the paradigm. We shifted everything out. It's been slow, like moving through molasses, frankly, but we are moving slowly towards having that equality of understanding. Yes, equal pay, equal respect, equal regard for both genders is this is kind of my wish in a way,
yeah.
and yours as well. So yeah, it was time for change for sure.
So just to sort of wrap it up for our listeners, for men that are struggling in their relationship, or maybe they've heard what you heard from the woman that told you that you weren't showing up how she wanted you to, what advice would you give them? And then again, from the other's perspective, if a woman is being accused of being a ball breaker or whatever, what
Well,
what
faster, yeah.
Bullbuster, ball breaker. What would your advice be to them? So let's start off with the men that are hearing, or the feedback is that they need to man up or grow a pair.
The challenge, the frustration is frankly that for most of us who have parents who were born in those years, that was the language they used, and we didn't know any different. So the next step for men, and I can recommend some books if you want to reach out to me. I've been through so many seminars now; I could give you a whole list of things that I can recommend. But the bottom line is that for most, the best opportunity for men is to learn how to or look for something beyond being macho. Macho is so not workable. That's why the Me Too conversation started. That's why all those different frustrations for women happen, because men didn't know how to be in their masculine. And masculinity is, simply put, open heart, straight spine. Those two qualities alone bring ourselves back to ourselves and gives us a place to reside in where we take care of ourselves, but we also have some clarity and direction, which makes things different. For women, really, it is to know that being the, well, I would say bitchy way of being, but being the way that's needy and not respecting yourselves is not healthy either. For women, truly owning your authority, your power, your self-respect, because as a woman, when you're in your feminine, it's automatic as far as I'm concerned. But when you do own that place and recognize that you're not less than anybody else, that you stand for yourself and your values are worth honoring, that's the beginning, the seeds of where things can start shifting for you. So you can be a force in the world that makes a difference, where you feel proud of what you're doing. And it's not about against anybody, it's because it's for yourself. I think those are baby steps. Those are starting points to go for both genders.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really hear you, and I'm just. It's so interesting. I think because I've never. I think I have naturally, just because the way I grew up, just thought that women were always incredibly powerful. So I've never
Yes.
doubted. I've never felt that it was less than to be a woman at all. It just wouldn't have even
Right.
crossed my consciousness. Uh,
You had a gift in that way.
Say that again.
You had a gift in that way.
I did, yes, I did, and but I do see that some other people struggle, and that they feel they need to um, almost be in a role. You know what I mean? I meet women that think they have to act or be a certain way to be attractive to a man, and it would never occur to me that I had to be anything other than I am.
No,
Like, it just, to me, it's like, no, you just show up as you, and you're either a fit or you're not a fit. But I don't,
no.
never sort of looked at it as I have to show up in a certain role to attract a male, um,
Well,
which I find
fortunately,
fascinating.
is that a lot of women still believe the old paradigm that they need a man to be whole, which is totally inaccurate.
Mhm.
Thankfully, you don't have that one, but a lot of women still do. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and then the other one is the other way around, is also the men that have bought into this. I think we touched on this a few weeks ago, and I'm trying to remember the name of the. Oh, I know what it was. No, I'm not going to say it. He wrote a book, but it was about how to sort of bed a woman. I think we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago about how to get a woman into bed, and um, and And it was that macho role of somewhere somebody taught him to, bad boys win. To get a woman, you have to be a bad boy and you have to treat them rough. And what there's a phrase somebody actually used, that my friend told me about. Thankfully, I've never met a man that has used it, but he called it something like slap and pat. It was like slap them down and then give them a compliment. It's that push pull. It's that narcissistic,
Yep.
tearing you down, building you up, and you end up sort of on this hook of wanting approval. And it's so, yes, that's my, you've given your 2 cents of what you advise to men and women, and mine is no role playing. Just be yourself. Just 100%
Absolutely.
be yourself, and you will find that balance, that right balance with the other person. And it's
Yeah.
okay to be fluid, to go backwards and forwards into your masculine and your feminine, depending on what the needs are in the relationship. As long as you're both not in the feminine at the same time vying for that position, or both in the masculine vying for that position. But
Doesn't work.
exchange,
Absolutely.
exactly, to exchange those roles and have that fluidity, I think, is a beautiful relationship.
Well, the thing I want to say, just as a PS on that, is that it's really about knowing who you really are. Because the other challenge also, we've been trained by a lot of culture and our families and beliefs to be something we're not really meant to be anyway. So this journey, which is so key, is when you navigate back to who you really are, and also what your natural base position is on the spectrum. When you really get that place, then it gets easier because you don't have to fight for anything. You just know who you are, and it's easier. So yeah, it's worth the work.
Beautiful. Yeah, you just relax into who you are. Exactly. No
Yeah.
having to perform or be or anything like that. Well, we are done for this week, Barry. Thank you, everyone, for listening again, and
Indeed.
we will see you next week.
See you next week. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.